The NFL just disrespected the Raiders in the most insane way possible. No prime-time games. No spotlight. No trust. No respect. And now Raider Nation is looking at this 2026 schedule wondering one thing: are the Raiders about to shock the entire league, or is this season headed toward complete chaos? Before we go any further, if you're part of Raider Nation and you ride with this team through every high and every heartbreak, hit that subscribe button right now because this season is about to get absolutely wild. The Las Vegas Raiders officially got their 2026 NFL schedule released, and I'm not gonna lie, man, the more you look at this thing, the more disrespectful it feels. It honestly feels like the NFL looked at the Raiders and basically said, yeah, we don't believe in you at all. Think about this for a second. 17 games. An entire NFL season. And not one single primetime game. No Monday Night Football. No Sunday Night Football. No Thursday Night Football. No Thanksgiving. No Christmas spotlight. Nothing. That is absolutely insane for a franchise like the Raiders. This is one of the most historic brands in football. Love them or hate them, people watch the Raiders. Raider Nation travels everywhere. The fan base is massive. The energy is different. And somehow the NFL decided this team deserves zero national spotlight. That's crazy. And honestly, it tells you exactly what the league thinks about this roster heading into 2026. The NFL is basically saying they don't trust the Raiders to be relevant this year. They don't trust the quarterback situation. They don't trust the coaching staff. They don't trust this team to compete consistently enough for national television. That's the message. And yeah, that should make Raider fans angry. Because let's be real here, every single season we watch mediocre teams get shoved into primetime games over and over again just because they have a big quarterback name attached to them. We've all seen terrible football games get forced onto national television because the NFL wants ratings. So for the Raiders to get completely ignored like this, that's brutal. And what makes this even more interesting is what NFL executive Mike North said about the Raiders situation. He basically admitted the league doesn't know what this team is yet because of the uncertainty surrounding Fernando Mendoza and the quarterback situation overall. Now let's talk about that for a second because this is where things get fascinating. The Raiders have veteran quarterback Kirk Cousins in the building, but everybody knows the future conversation is centered around Fernando Mendoza. That's the name people are watching. That's the wild card. That's the mystery. And according to the NFL, that uncertainty mattered. Mike North basically explained that the league doesn't know when Mendoza might play, or if he'll even become the starter this season. He also mentioned that if the Raiders stay competitive and remain in the playoff race, the team could eventually get flexed into bigger television windows later in the year. But the key part of what he said was this: you don't draft your way into prime time. You play your way into prime time. That right there. That's a direct shot. That is the NFL openly saying the Raiders have not earned respect yet. And maybe Raider Nation needed to hear that. Because if we're being honest, the Raiders have spent years living off history instead of consistent results. The logo is legendary. The fan base is legendary. The culture is legendary. But the actual on-field results over the last several seasons, they haven't matched the reputation. That's just reality. But here's the thing that makes this season dangerous for the rest of the NFL. Disrespected teams become motivated teams. And sometimes the most dangerous version of a football team is the one nobody believes in. Question for Raider Nation early in this video: do you think the NFL made a massive mistake by leaving the Raiders out of prime time, or do you think this team still has to prove itself first? Be honest in the comments. Now here's where things get even worse. It's not just the prime time disrespect. The Raiders also got hammered when it comes to rest differential. And if you don't know what that means, let me explain because this stuff actually matters way more than fans realize. The Raiders rank near the bottom of the entire NFL in net rest differential at -13. 5. That is brutal. Basically, over the course of the season, the Raiders will consistently be playing teams that had more time to recover and prepare than they did. And in the NFL, extra rest is a huge advantage. People underestimate how violent this sport really is. Every single player in the league is dealing with pain by the middle of the season. Every player. Offensive linemen are playing through knee pain. Defensive backs are playing through ankle injuries. Running backs are getting hit by linebackers every single week. Quarterbacks are getting slammed into the turf non-stop. This game destroys your body. So when another team has extra recovery time while you're still trying to heal, that matters a lot. There are going to be games this season where the Raiders face opponents coming off mini-byes, Thursday games, or full bye weeks while Las Vegas is still exhausted from physical matchups the week before. That adds up. And coaching staffs benefit too. More rest means more preparation. More film study. More installation time. More recovery practices. More strategic advantages. So when Raider fans say the NFL screwed this team over with the schedule, honestly, they might not be exaggerating. Now the one positive is that the Raiders are basically middle of the pack in travel distance this year, which helps a little bit. At least they're not flying across the country every single week. But now let's get into the actual schedule itself because this is where things become really interesting. And I'm telling you right now, this schedule is either going to create a playoff team or completely destroy this season by November. There's almost no middle ground. The Raiders open the year at home against the Miami Dolphins. And honestly, I think that's a very winnable football game. I'm not sold on Miami at all right now. There's uncertainty there. There's instability there. And defensively, I still think that team has major issues. Meanwhile, the Raiders are going to come into week 1 emotional, energized, and desperate to prove people wrong after all this national disrespect. That matters. Opening games are emotional games. And if Las Vegas comes out aggressive defensively and establishes the run early, I think they absolutely can punch Miami in the mouth. In fact, I'll say this right now. That might be one of the most important games of the entire season. Because if the Raiders start 1-0 after all this off-season criticism, confidence inside that locker room is going to explode. Then comes the Chargers. And divisional games are always chaos. I don't care what the records are. I don't care who's favored. AFC West football is violent and unpredictable. The Raiders always play division rivals hard. So realistically, I think Las Vegas splits with the Chargers this year. Then you get the Saints. And this is one of those sneaky games nobody's talking about. Because the Saints are weird right now. They've got some talent. They've rebuilt parts of the offensive line. There's optimism about their quarterback future. But at the same time, there's still uncertainty surrounding whether this coaching staff can actually elevate the roster long-term. So for me, that's another game the Raiders absolutely can win. And suddenly you start looking at the beginning of this schedule and you realize something. This team could actually start hot. That's not crazy. Imagine if the Raiders start 3-1. Imagine the energy in Vegas if they beat Miami, beat the Saints, split early divisional games, and suddenly the offense looks competent. People would lose their minds. And this is why I think the NFL may have underestimated this team. Because while the roster still has flaws, there are enough winnable games early in the season to create momentum. Now eventually things get harder. The Bills show up. The Rams show up. That's where the season gets serious. Because those are playoff caliber football teams with elite coaching and high-level talent. And honestly, if the Raiders can split those games somehow, that changes everything. Especially at home. Because Raider Nation absolutely shows up when meaningful football returns to Vegas. And let me say something right now. If the Raiders are scoring points early this season, Allegiant Stadium is going to become one of the loudest environments in football again. Fans are starving for meaningful football. Starving. Question of the day: if the Raiders are sitting at 6-5 near the playoff race, would you keep starting Kirk Cousins, or would you hand the franchise over to Fernando Mendoza immediately? Comment below, because Raider Nation is going to be divided on this all season. Now, after those tougher games, the schedule actually becomes manageable again. The Jets are on this schedule, and honestly, I think the Raiders should beat them. The Jets feel like a team stuck in transition. There's talent there, especially on the offensive line, but they still feel incomplete. And depending on how the season unfolds, they could absolutely be leaning toward draft positioning by the second half of the year. Then comes one of the biggest emotional games on the entire schedule. The San Francisco 49ers. And Raider fans in Northern California already know what this game means. This isn't just another football game. This is pride. This is history. This is hatred. The Battle of the Bay still matters no matter what anybody says. And even though the Raiders now play in Las Vegas, there are still generations of fans in Northern California who absolutely despise the 49ers. This game is personal. And honestly, I think the 49ers are vulnerable this year. They still have talent, obviously. But this roster is aging in several key areas. Injuries continue stacking up every season. And eventually every contender hits that wall where the dominance starts slipping just a little. Could this be the year that happens? Maybe. Then you look at Seattle. And I'm really not convinced the Seahawks are going to be as dangerous offensively after losing Clint Kubiak. We've seen this happen before in the NFL. Great coordinators leave, and suddenly everything changes. We saw it happen when elite offensive minds left other coaching staffs around the league. Systems matter. Play callers matter. Continuity matters. And sometimes teams that look dominant one season suddenly collapse the next. That's why I think people are overrating parts of this Raiders schedule. Everybody keeps talking about strength of schedule based on last season's records, but NFL seasons change fast. Fast. Teams fall apart every year. Teams rise unexpectedly every year. Nobody saw Washington making noise when they did. Nobody expected certain playoff collapses. Nobody predicts injuries correctly. That's why this league is impossible to forecast. And honestly, I think the Raiders are one of the hardest teams in football to predict right now. Because there are two completely different realities sitting in front of this franchise. Reality number one. Everything clicks. The defense becomes aggressive. The offensive line stabilizes. Kirk Cousins gives competent veteran quarterback play. The coaching staff creates structure. Fernando Mendoza develops behind the scenes. And suddenly this team wins 9 or 10 games and fights for a playoff spot. That's possible. But then there's reality number two. The offensive line struggles. The quarterback situation becomes messy. The division beats them up physically. The rest differential becomes overwhelming. Close games turn into losses. And suddenly the Raiders are sitting there at 4-8 with chaos everywhere. That's also possible. That's what makes this season so fascinating. The ceiling and the floor are miles apart. Now personally, I think this team lands somewhere around the middle. I can realistically see 8 or 9 wins if things break correctly. Because there are enough winnable games here. The Dolphins are beatable. The Saints are beatable. The Jets are beatable. The Titans are beatable. The Cardinals are beatable. And if you simply split your divisional games, suddenly you're right in the playoff conversation. But the biggest storyline of this entire season might not even be the record. It might be Fernando Mendoza. Because I truly believe there's a scenario where the Raiders eventually turn to the rookie late in the year. Especially around that Week 13 bye. Watch that carefully. Because if the Raiders are hovering around 500 and Kirk Cousins starts struggling physically or mentally under pressure, the calls for Mendoza are going to become deafening. Imagine this scenario. The Raiders are fighting for a wild card spot. The offense starts stalling. Fans are frustrated. The rookie is waiting. That pressure becomes enormous. And if the coaching staff believes Mendoza gives them a spark, they might pull the trigger. And if that happens, everything changes. Because young quarterbacks can completely alter the emotional energy of a franchise overnight. We've seen it happen all across the NFL. One rookie catches fire, and suddenly belief takes over the locker room. Now imagine if Fernando Mendoza comes in late in the year and starts winning games. Imagine if the Raiders are sitting there at 6-5 or 7-5 and the rookie suddenly ignites the offense. Can you imagine the energy? Can you imagine the headlines? The same NFL that refused to give the Raiders a prime-time game would suddenly be begging to flex them onto national television. That's the irony in all of this. The Raiders might actually become one of the most entertaining stories in football specifically because nobody believes in them right now. And honestly, that feels very Raiders. Disrespected. Ignored. Counted out. But still dangerous enough to ruin somebody's season. At the end of the day, this 2026 schedule is going to test everything about this organization. The coaching staff. The quarterback room. The toughness of the roster. The depth. The leadership. Everything. And by the end of this season, we're finally going to know whether this franchise is actually building towards something real, or whether Raider Nation is heading toward another painful reset. But one thing is absolutely certain. This team is not boring. And whether they win 5 games or fight for the playoffs, the drama this season is going to be insane. Raider Nation, buckle up. Because this ride is either about to become legendary, or completely unhinged.